The committee meets this morning to receive testimony on recent U.S. Navy collisions at sea, including USS Lake Champlain, USS Fitzgerald, and the USS John S. McCain, as well as the grounding of USS Antietam. We welcome our witnesses, the Honorable Richard Spencer, Secretary of the Navy, Admiral John Richardson, Chief of Naval Operations, and Mr. John Pendleton, Director of Defense, Force Structure and Readiness Issues at the Government Accountability Office. I'd like to take a moment to recognize family members who lost loved ones in the Fitzgerald and McCain collisions, who are here with us today as our honored guests. From the Fitzgerald, Eric Ream, the wife of Chief Petty Officer Gary Ream, Stephen Ritzko and Shono Douglas, parents and brother of Petty Officer 3rd Class Shingo Douglas, Senior Chief Petty Officer Victor and Carmen Sabayan, and their son Luke, parents and brother of Petty Officer 1st Class Carlos Victor Sabayan, Wayne and Nikki Rigsby, father and stepmother of Seaman Dakota Rigsby, Darrell Martin, father of Petty Officer 1st Class Xavier Martin, and from the McCain, Jennifer Simon, wife of Petty Officer 1st Class Kevin Bushell, and his mother, Karen Bushell, along with her wife, Ann Shane. Rachel Eccles, mother of Petty Officer 2nd Class Timothy Eccles, Teresa and Austin Palmer, mother and brother of Petty Officer 2nd Class Logan Palmer. Let me express my deepest condolences to you all on behalf of this committee, the U.S. Senate, and the American people. Your presence here today reminds us of our sacred obligation to look after the young people who volunteer to serve in the military. Would those individuals who I just named stand so that we can recognize their presence here? Thank you and God bless. The USS John S. McCain was named after my father and grandfather. I remember the ship launching ceremony nearly 25 years ago, and my wife Cindy continues to serve as the ship's sponsor. So believe me, these tragedies are personal for me and my family as well, and we share in your sorrow. My commitment to all of you is that we will get to the bottom of these incidents. It's simply unacceptable for U.S. Navy ships to run aground or collide with other ships, and to have 4 such incidents in the span of 7 months is truly alarming. This committee takes seriously its oversight role. We will identify shortcomings, fix them, and hold people accountable. We will learn lessons from these recent tragedies to make the Navy better and all who serve in it safer. I know our Navy leaders share these goals and will work together with us to achieve them. To that end, I hope our witnesses will help the committee better understand what happened with regard to these incidents. We are interested in the status of investigations, common factors or trends identified, root causes, corrective actions, and accountability measures. We'd also like to know the extent and cost of damage to the ships and operational impacts of unanticipated repairs. Finally, we ask you to highlight areas in which we in Congress can assist to help ensure the safety and proficiency of our sailors, including changes to current law. I'm deeply concerned by Mr. Pendleton's written testimony, which indicates 37%, that's over 1/3, of the training certifications for U.S. Navy cruisers and destroyers based in Japan were expired as of June. As he notes, this represents more than a 5-fold increase in the percentage of expired warfare certifications for these ships in the last 2 years. I would point out warfare certifications are a ship's ability to fully be prepared to engage in combat. Press reporting paints an even bleaker picture. The McCain had experienced expired training certification in 6 of the 10 key key warfare mission areas. The Fitzgerald had expired certification in all 10 mission areas. Secretary Spencer and Admiral Richardson, I don't need to tell you that this is troubling and it is unacceptable. And we acknowledge and appreciate the accountability actions the Navy has taken to date. The Navy has relieved 2 commanding officers, a commander and a captain. It has issued 20 reprimands to other officers and enlisted sailors. Since August 23rd, the Squadron 2-star strike group and 3-star fleet commander will all have been relieved for cause. I assure you that this committee will do everything we can to support the Navy leadership's efforts to course correct. But we must also call you to task and demand answers. As leaders of our Navy, you must do better. In particular, I'd like to know why the recommendations of the GAO and other relevant reviews, such as the 2010 Fleet Review Panel, were not effectively implemented and maintained. The lives of the 17 sailors lost in the Fitzgerald and McCain collisions were priceless, and I mourn their loss. These preventable incidents also come with a very real price tag in terms of the cost of these to taxpayers. I understand the current estimate for repairs is approximately $600 million, but the cost will also be felt in unexpected deployments for other ships to meet operational requirements. I'm also concerned by the apparent difficulty of navigating safely in the Western Pacific. With 3 of these ships now non-deployable for months or years due to damage repairs, there are serious questions about our maritime readiness to fight in response to North Korean, Chinese, and Russian aggression. The ongoing reviews directed by Secretary Spencer and Admiral Richardson must quickly get to the bottom of this and identify root causes, corrective actions, and further accountability actions. Time is of the essence. I hope these reviews fully examine how discrete changes over the years have compounded and resulted in prioritizing the need to do more with less. And that has come at the expense of operational effectiveness. These changes include longer deployments, so-called optimal manning of ships, less hand-on and initial training, less time for maintenance, less time to train, and an officer personnel system governed by laws like the Defense Officer Personnel Management Act and the Goldwater-Nichols Act, which were put in place more than 3 decades ago, and which may have created a preference for breadth of experience over depth of technical experience. We need to look seriously and rigorously at all of these types of systemic contributing factors, and I would like your assurance, Secretary Spencer, that you will do so, and that as you consider additional accountability actions, you will look at all levels of command as appropriate. While we are focused on incidents at sea today, this committee recognizes that the current readiness crisis affects all of our military services. It is part of a larger, deeper trend of forcing military units at the tactical level to try to do too much with too little. In the last 3 years, fatal training accidents have taken the lives of 4 times more service members than our enemies have in combat. This cannot continue. Unfortunately, this is an issue of command. There's plenty of blame to go around for the deteriorated state of our military, and we cannot ignore Congress's responsibility. Years of budget cuts, continuing resolutions, and sequestration have forced our military to maintain a high operational tempo with limited resources. We know that has come at the cost of training, maintenance, readiness, effectiveness, and the lives of too many brave young Americans. Our service chiefs, including the Chief of Naval Operations, have testified repeatedly that the Budget Control Act and sequestration are endangering the lives of our men and women in uniform. My dear friends, we were warned. To fix this problem, we must all do better. Military leaders must make honest assessments of their requirements and request the full extent of what they need. In turn, we in Congress must provide these resources in a timely and predictable way. That is the only way to truly restore the readiness of our force. It is the only solution to ensuring that accidents like this do not happen again. And it is the bare minimum we owe to the brave men and women who risk their lives to defend our nation. Senator Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to join Senator McCain in welcoming Secretary Spencer and Admiral Richardson and Mr. Pendleton to the committee this morning to testify on the issues surrounding the recent accidents and the Department's plans for determining what went wrong and what steps need to be taken to ensure such accidents do not occur in the future. Service in the nation's armed forces can be very dangerous. The country is saddened whenever we lose one of America's sons or daughters, but it is particularly disturbing when young people are casualties in the course of conducting normal peacetime operations. I want to extend my condolences to the families of those who lost. I know I join all my colleagues and Chairman McCain in expressing our profound sympathy for your loss. We should not prejudge the outcome of the Internal Navy reviews of the circumstances around these accidents. However, we do know that the Department of the Navy has been facing serious readiness problems caused by deferred maintenance, reduced steaming and flying hours, and canceled training and deployments. In addition, the Navy, like other services, has also been operating at a very high tempo for a prolonged period. These conditions have been aggravated by many years of budget constraints and uncertainty, which have forced leaders into making difficult decisions. All these factors have inevitably taken a toll on Navy commanders and Navy operations. Secretary Spencer and Admiral Richardson, I ask your commitment that you are giving this situation your full attention, that you will follow these investigations wherever they lead, and that you will share all findings with Congress. We must do all that is necessary to provide and sustain our Navy and all our armed forces. Again, I thank the witnesses, and I look forward to the testimony. Thank you.
Secretary Spencer.
Chairman McCain, Ranking Member Reid, distinguished members of this committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you and talk about the state of our Navy. Before we move forward, though, I want to express our deepest condolences to the families and loved ones and the crews who have lost one of their own in the last few months. Having looked into the eyes of many of these families and shared time with them, knowing that their returned ones return home in a flag-draped casket, I know my words are completely insufficient. To the families present, please know that Polly and I have you in our thoughts and prayers. The 17 sailors from the USS Fitzgerald and John S. McCain were sons, brothers, husbands, fiancés, uncles, and friends. They were patriots, and they will not be forgotten. We pledge our full support to their families and crews. We're going to back our words with actions. We have a problem in the Navy, and we're going to fix it. In addition to the investigations already initiated, we are conducting 2 thorough reviews. The CNO's comprehensive review will take a look at the tactical and operational situation at hand. My strategic readiness review will be an independent team comprised of military and industry experts that will look and examine root causes, accountability, long-term systemic issues, and then provide remedial insight. These reviews will complement and enhance each other, providing the depth and criticality that the situation demands. After I've received and reviewed the recommendations from our teams, I will act to the limits of my authority to change processes and acquire any needed capabilities in order to protect our people. I'm here today to impress our sense of urgency and to highlight a way forward to renew a culture of safety and training across the fleet. We will take lessons learned from the recent tragic events and come out the other side a stronger, more capable Navy Marine Corps team. Make no mistake, we are not waiting 60 days or 90 days to make adjustments. The CNO will address a list of actions the 7th Fleet is taking immediately to address the situation at hand, ranging from ship-to-ship materiel inspections to the activation of AIS radar identifications while we're trafficking specific areas. We are not lying idle, and I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we are committed. I appreciate the opportunity to work with you on the remedial solutions and to find our way forward. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Admiral Richardson.
Chairman McCain, Ranking Member Reed, and distinguished members of the committee, I also want to thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the recent U.S. Navy incidents at sea. To begin with, I also want to express my deep condolences to the families of the 17 sailors who served their country with honor and distinction and lost their lives in USS Fitzgerald and USS John S. McCain. In both of these tragic incidents, our sailors acted heroically to save their ships as they combated flooding and the loss of critical systems. Care and support to these families, the families of our sailors, is our top priority. I've committed to them that we will learn everything we can from these tragic events to prevent another accident. As you pointed out, sir, many of the family members are here today, and we will always stand with you. What we do is inherently dangerous, but it is leadership responsibility to ensure we provide the right training and oversight to keep our team safe and effective. We are taking immediate corrective actions to ensure we meet the training and material readiness standard to prevent another mishap. We are not stopping with immediate actions. In addition to the investigations into the specific incidents on Fitzgerald and McCain, we're conducting, as the Secretary pointed out, a comprehensive review which will turn over every stone to examine for more systemic problems. And this review will complement the Secretary's strategic review. I've testified several times about the triple whammy, the corrosive confluence of high operational tempo, inadequate budgets, and budget uncertainty. The funding approved in fiscal year 17 is being used to plug our most urgent readiness holes in the fleet, and our 18 request sustains that progress. While we have prioritized maintenance and readiness dollars, full recovery will not happen overnight. It will take years with stable and adequate resources. But make no mistake, sir, while these factors do exert a negative force on the challenges we face, at the core, this issue is about leadership, especially command. Our first dollar, our first molecule of effort, our first team must go to safety. Safety is first. And no matter what the situation, those charged with command must achieve and maintain a standard that ensures their teams are trained and ready to safely and effectively conduct assigned operations. We must remain vigilant to meeting this standard, fighting against every pressure to erode it. Our commanders must meet the absolute standard to develop safe and effective teams. If we cannot meet the standard, we do not deploy until we do. And we must establish a command climate that supports honest reporting. Senator, these incidents demand our full attention. We must provide our sailors the necessary resources and training to execute their assigned missions. I am accountable for the safe and effective operations of our Navy, and we will fix this. I own this problem. I'm confident that our Navy will identify the root causes and correct them, and that we'll be better in the end. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
Mr. Pendleton.
Chairman McCain, Ranking Member Reed, members of the committee, thank you for having me here today to summarize GAO's work on Navy readiness. Mr. Chairman, I don't know what caused the tragic recent accidents, but I do know from my work that the Navy is caught between an unrelenting operational demand and a limited supply of ships. At this point, I'm skeptical that the Navy will be able to make significant readiness gains unless the demands on them are decreased. Even with increased funding going forward, my assessment agrees with the Navy that it will take several years to rebuild training, manning, and maintenance, foundations of readiness that have become shaky over time. Our work has also revealed significant management issues that the Navy must confront. In a 2015 report, we found that the ships based in Japan had such aggressive deployment schedules that they did not have dedicated training periods like ships in the United States did. In fact, we were told that the overseas base ships were so busy that they had to train on the margins. When I asked what that meant, it was explained to me that it meant that they had to squeeze in training when they could. The assumption, I think, was that the 7th Fleet, because it was perpetually in motion, it was ready. I think the Navy has now realized that this conventional wisdom was in fact likely faulty. We recommended at the time back in 2015 that the Navy revise deployment schedules to create dedicated training time. and also more broadly assess the risk associated with increased reliance on overseas basing of ships. DoD and the Navy agreed with us, at least on paper, but they've taken little action since to implement our recommendations. The Navy has other, even more broad management challenges that it must address, like ship manning. A Navy internal study found that sailors were often working over 100 hours a week back in 2014, and it concluded this was unsustainable and potentially contributing to a poor safety culture. We recommended, in brief, that the Navy assess how much work it actually takes to run a ship and use that to size the crew. Maintenance is also taking longer and costing more. Ship deployments have often been extended. This causes ships to have more problems when they're brought in for maintenance. Shipyards have struggled to keep pace for a number of reasons. Over the past few years, the lost operational days that have been created by the maintenance overruns have cost the Navy the equivalent of the presence of almost 3 surface ships per year. That in turn strains the remaining fleet, and it's an unsustainable, vicious cycle. As you know, the Navy is not alone in its readiness challenges. That's why GAO recommended, and this committee has supported, thank you, the need for the development of a department-wide readiness rebuilding plan that explicitly balances resources with demands and is transparent about how long it will take to rebuild readiness and what it will cost. I suggest you continue to insist that the department provide you that plan. Over the past 3 years, GAO has made 14 recommendations in all to the Department of Defense to help guide the Navy and the services toward improved readiness. And as the Navy and DoD develop a roadmap going forward, I sincerely hope they consider our recommendations to help guide them. Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me here today, and I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pendleton. I appreciate your testimony, but more importantly, I thank you for the important work that you do, which is incredibly important to this committee. Secretary Spencer and Admiral Richardson, surface force readiness has degraded over the last 10 years. Surface chain of command has become complicated on the waterfront. There's a blurring of lines of authority and accountability. The growing backlog of off-ship repair requirements, a large, deep maintenance requirement that has not been adequately identified or resourced. The effort to derive efficiencies has overtaken our culture of effectiveness. The materiel condition of the surface force is well below acceptable levels to support reliable, sustained operations at sea and preserve ships to their full service life expectancy. Ships home ported overseas have limited training and maintenance, which results in difficulty keeping crews trained and ships maintained. Some ships home ported overseas have had consistently deferred maintenance, resulting in long-term degraded materiel condition. Without a sustainable operational schedule and comprehensive risk assessment for ships home ported overseas, it will be difficult for the Navy to identify and mitigate risks. I could go on. Mr. Secretary, do you agree that these statements ring true today?
I do, Senator.
And I agree with you. Unfortunately, these are findings from the Navy and GAO reports from 2010 to 2015. Many of the issues we're discussing today have been known to Navy leaders for years. How do we explain that, Admiral?
Senator, there is no explanation to reconcile those two observations. While clearly there is much more to be done, and these observations point to those, and I commend the work of Mr. Pendleton and the GAO as well to providing such sound recommendations. There has been also an effort to address those observations. We've not been sitting idle. And so whilst clearly it's been insufficient to close the readiness and effectiveness gap, we have been making steady investments to respond to the indications that we've got in training, in manpower, and in maintenance. And we'll remain committed to closing that gap as well and reconciling the difference between supply and demand.
Well, I can't continue this much further without asking your assessment of the effect of sequestration on your ability to address these conditions that I cited, which come from GAO and the Navy itself. What effect does sequestration, for example, we're now facing this same collision coming up with, as of 1 October, what effect does sequestration have in affecting these recommendations and situations as described by the GAO and the Navy itself? Mr. Secretary?
Senator, the impact of sequestration and continuing resolutions is deleterious. It's an impact on the Navy that is stunning. Having been asked to come and run a business, i.e. the Navy, as CEO of the Navy on the man, equip, train, and supply side of the equation, it's very disturbing. Just looking today to give you a feel, Senator, with the CR that's coming up starting October 1 going through December 8th, the fleet will mitigate approximately $200 million of O&M shortfall over the next 69 days.
That's operation and maintenance.
That is correct, I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a tentative number, it's still in work, but that's where we think it's coming from. The fleet will minimize the impact by incrementally funding or shortening periods of contracts where possible. This will cause a degradation in the quality of work. The fleet will also delay consumables and phased replacement material purchasing for ships. And this will impact, again, the quality and service and the operation of the ships. We have to do management of the funds resources we have. This is not solely a funds issue, but you asked about CR and the effects of sequestration. We are living them. They are untenable.
Admiral?
Sir, if I could add to that, the effects of sequestration and continuing resolutions makes everything harder, everything. And as we face the continuing resolution before us now, in addition to what the Secretary said, we will be considering deferring or slipping 11 more ship maintenance availabilities. There are dozens of new projects that we won't be able to get started on. These are things that would start to address some of these conditions that we've got. Over the past 9 years now, looking over as we review the data, the number of efficiency studies, effectiveness studies, can you do more with less? They all result in a constant pressure to, it rarely results in an increase. Having said that, sir, I maintain that this is an issue of command, and that if you only give us one ship, it's our obligation to operate that ship safely and effectively. And so I do not, while that makes it harder, that is not in no way an excuse for the performance that led to these 4 incidents.
Mr. Pendleton, do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, we heard about the impact of budget everywhere when we do our work. It's hard to pin it down exactly. There's examples in our reports of depot maintenance being deferred and furloughs and postponed deployments and ship fuel problems. I think it's a cumulative disruption at this point. I think what we judged back last year was we are where we are. And the department, not just the Navy, needs a plan for going forward, in part to be able to articulate what's real and reasonable going forward, sir.
Thank you. I'm very proud of the vote of confidence in the Senate approval of the Defense Authorization Act, which is overwhelming and a source of pride to me that all 27 members of this committee agreed on the legislation that was just approved overwhelmingly. I have to point out there was an effort by an amendment by Senator Cotton to try to rectify this sequestration issue to some degree, and I will not name individuals, but it was blocked from even being considered for a vote. That, to me, is Well, it's disgraceful. Senator Reed.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Richardson, you continue to come back, and I think appropriately, to the issue of command, even though we all understand the physical and procedural and resource constraints that Navy has faced. But the issue of command is sort of played out, and not theoretically, but very practically. That's when a commander says, I can't do this because my ship is not ready. Have you, in your capacity, indicated to COCOMs that you can't provide ships because not ready? Have commanders of individual ships said, I can't, to the fleet, I can't move because my ship is not ready?
Sir, as I've testified before, and you know very well, we don't meet more than 50% of the combatant commander's demands as it is, just from a force structure standpoint and a combination of that and readiness. And there have been times where I've spoken with my subordinate commanders where there is just insufficient time to get a force trained and certified to meet a deployment date, and we have to go back to the combatant commander and say, you're going to have to wait.
And with respect to the issue of command, when those tough calls are made by the commander, that does not result in any kind of either formal or informal disparagement of the commander. That's
Senator, if I could go down and give that commander a handshake and a medal, I would do that. This is exactly the type of honesty and transparency that we need to run a Navy that's safe and effective.
And so in the process going forward, not only will you be attempting, I think, to analyze the issues, come up with resources, but also continue to stress the idea of commanders having the ultimate responsibility to determine the worthiness of the ship.
That'll be the absolute center of gravity of our efforts there.
Mr. Pendle and his colleagues have done some excellent work, and they point out that the certifications of a significant number of ships, particularly in the Pacific, are not adequate. Can you tell us what that certification means? Is that a good indication of the capability of the ship, or is that not?
This is an indication that we use, sir. This is our indication, and so it's either a good indication or it's a meaningless indication. I'd like to think that those certifications mean something, and while Mr. Pendleton's report gets to some ratios, and I'll leave it to him to get to that math, I agree with his conclusion that over the last 2 years, the number of certifications on our ships, particularly in the forward deployed naval force in Japan, has dropped precipitously, and that deserves our full attention. Should have been brought to our attention more urgently before now.
With respect to deployed forces, there seems to be a distinction between deployed forces and stateside forces in terms of lots of things, repairs, refitting, resources, training. That is going to be a focus, I presume, of you and the Secretary's inquiries about why the disparity?
It certainly will be a focus of the comprehensive review to take a look at the way we generate and certify readiness, compare it to the forces in the United States, the rotational forces that leave, deploy, and come back, versus those forward deployed forces that remain at a higher state of readiness in theater.
And Admiral Richardson, over the last several years, the Navy, not the Navy alone, but all the military services have attempted to, quote unquote, streamline training, make it more effective because of deployment schedules, because of the availability of personnel. Do you think that in any way contributed to these accidents, that these young people were, hustled through, if you will, and not without the same kind of opportunities that predecessors might have had to learn their jobs?
Sir, I'll tell you that it's too early to say if these had a specific impact on those incidents. Those investigations are still in progress, but we are looking specifically at that. What is the climate with respect to the priority of training and certification, and does it always get given lower priority to operations and the need to go out and execute the mission? And then, as Mr. Pendleton and the Secretary have hinted, that when maintenance periods run long, that further pressurizes our operational time. And so training gets, is there a pattern that we consistently box-out training, particularly the training on the fundamentals. That's absolutely a focus of the investigations.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I chair the Readiness Subcommittee, and on February 8th, we had a readiness hearing. Admiral Moran was at that hearing, and now keep in mind that was February the 8th, and of the 4 incidents we're talking about, all except the one on January 31st were since that hearing that we had. And Secretary Spencer at the readiness hearing. In fact, I look at your situation. You've now been in the job for, what, 5 weeks, 6 weeks? I bet you wonder sometimes what you've gotten into, but it's a tough situation, and you're the kind of person that can try something new. And but at this hearing, Moran testified that the Navy could only meet about 40% of its demand from the regional combatant commanders. We've heard the reaffirmation of that, which has been going on for a long time. We also heard the Navy is the smallest it's been in 99 years, and went on to say, it's become clear to me that the Navy's overall readiness has reached its lowest level in many years. That is all due to the inconsistent and insufficient funding that does not match the demand for Navy forces due to global threat situations. So we hear over and over again that the Navy is taking on more and with less. So Secretary Spencer and Admiral Richardson, if the Navy is focused on ensuring the foreign deployed ships are ready, and recent history is our example, what shape would the rest of the fleet be in terms of readiness? What shape is the non-forward deployed in? How would you characterize that? Admiral Richardson.
Sir, it has been our consistent priority to resource those forces that are forward deployed and that are going to deploy. Mm-hmm. And that the surge forces, we call them, those forces that are here in the continental United States that may be the next to deploy, or they may be called to respond in a crisis to reinforce the forward deployed forces, those are the ones that remain less ready than we need them to respond in the way that they need to. This is where you do a lot of that basic training, right? And so the one thing that's unforgivable in these situations is time. You just cannot get back the time.
Yeah.
So the flying hours, you can't catch up, right? That time is gone. The steaming hours, all of those things that don't happen in basic training, it's very hard to recapture that just in terms of developing a level of experience and sophistication.
Okay, you've called for a comprehensive review and an operational pause. When did the operational pause start?
The operational pause started pretty much immediately after the collision of John S. McCain.
Yeah, and I know that the comprehensive review is still underway. Can you talk about anything that perhaps during this pause any observations you've
Senator, thank you. I did direct that operational pause because at that point I needed to elevate this to a Navy-wide perspective so that both ashore and afloat, we took some time to stop, take a break, and review our fundamentals to ensure that we are operating safely and effectively, and to correct any areas that required immediate attention. And in addition to that pause, the 7th Fleet conducted a stand-down to address navigation and seamanship basics. Mm-hmm. As a result of that, we've made a number of corrections, immediate actions, if you will. First of all waivers for certifications. The certification process has been elevated now to the 4-star level at the Pacific Fleet Commander. We are reviewing every single ship by ship, to evaluate their material and operational readiness. That is being done both administratively to make sure that our certification process is good, and also with physical visits. Yeah. We've also commenced a readiness for sea inspection on all of those ships to inspect and assess watch standard proficiency in material readiness.
So that pause has aided you in your comprehensive review.
Yes, sir. I mean, I have a list that I could go on in terms of immediate actions, but we are not waiting for these longer-term comprehensive reviews to complete. we're taking an action now to ensure a margin of safety for.
Well, thank you very much. Mr. Pendleton, you know, your candid and I think alarming assessment of the whole situation is not a surprise. And as you look over all the forewarned things, I think the chairman said in his opening statement, said we were warned, and I think we were. It does boil down to, I think it does anyway, to resources. And a lot of it, I think you would probably agree with that. This is what I'd like to ask you to do. I have 14 things in the Defense Authorization Bill we just passed yesterday, and assuming that we're able to keep these things in there, recognizing we have a conference to go, we have appropriations and all that, I'd like to have you look at these 14 things, look at the problems that we're trying to address in this particular hearing, and give us your evaluation as to how any of these 14 things might resolve the problem in a long term and a short term. All right?
We'll be happy to do that and provide it for the record.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. Cybersecurity, as we all know, is a growing concern as we become more reliant on electronic means for communication, for storage of data, for operation of day-to-day systems, and also for navigation and control systems. And I understand that cyber experts from the 10th Fleet were sent out to Singapore to investigate electronic data on board the USS John McCain to see if any cyber intrusions had taken place, and that Admiral Moran stated last week that future accident investigations will include cyber investigations to ensure that there's been no tampering. Can you tell me, I guess this is for you, Admiral Richardson, what are we doing proactively to ensure the security of our navigation systems and our electronic systems?
Senator, just as you said, we did send an investigation team out to the John S. McCain to take a look at that. I got a report, an update on that just this morning, and still no evidence of any kind of intrusion or tampering yet. We're continuing to investigate. And we've, in the Navy, have been on a steady path to continue to harden ourselves against, we'll really be prepared for operations in combat in the cyber domain. And that starts first and foremost, like everything, with people and organizations. And so we've been steadily bringing in and training cyber experts into our team. We stood up that 10th Fleet as a response to that. We have technical authority at SPAWAR out in San Diego. And we've got a information warfare type commander, just like all the other services down in Hampton Roads, Virginia. And so we believe that we're organized properly. Those organizations are becoming manned. Their structures are, those billets are being filled. The training is being done. And then we are doing a combination of things. Many of these measures require physical standards so that our systems are hardened against intrusion. We are certainly baking those into new systems that we are bringing on board. And then we are looking at hardening those legacy systems that we already own to the greatest degree possible. A very fast-moving problem, a very dynamic problem. I'm not saying we're there yet, but we're giving it a very high priority and resources.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear that. And obviously, that's another area where resources are very important. Senator McCain has talked about the problems of sequestration, which everyone on this committee knows very well. But I wonder if you could talk in detail about the impact of continuing resolutions, budget cycle after budget cycle, and how they affect maintenance and training plans for ships. And are forward deployed ships affected more than ships stateside? Is there any correlation there?
Ma'am, as I said, we will prioritize our resources to those forces that are forward deployed and that will deploy forward. And so we will not leave those teams short of resources. Having said that, the uncertainty that, well, actually, it's become actually certain. We're certain that we're not going to get a budget in the first quarter. And
which is a sad commentary on the budget situation.
And behaviors have adapted. And so we don't put anything important in the first quarter of the year, and we have to compete 3 out of 4 quarters of the game. In addition to just that fact, what happens is you have to double your contracting, right? You have to write a tiny little contract for the length of the continuing resolution, and then you have to write another one for the rest of the year. As you know, nothing new can start, and so we try not to schedule anything new in that first quarter. The maintenance and training, those are the hardest things. And so as those, as the uncertainty, injects itself, it is always, the things on the bubble are maintenance periods, particularly surface ship maintenance periods. It is, how many steaming hours am I going to get? How many flying hours am I going to get? $150 million per month shortfall. How do I manage that? These are the effects of continuing resolutions.
Senator, can I add to that context,
Please.
if I may? One of the things that you heard me testify when I was first here for confirmation was we really have to get our hands on industrial science, which the most primary fundamental of that is the line of sight to your resources. As I'm out there speaking to our suppliers and our contractors who are more than willing to work on our behalf, they cannot run their businesses when they don't have line of sight to commitment, and that is critical.
And certainly that's something that I've heard from suppliers in New Hampshire as well. Thank you all.
Admiral Richardson, Mr. Pendleton said he doesn't know what caused these accidents. After the two reports come out, do you think we'll have a better idea, and Mr. Pendleton will be?
We'll be crystal clear on that, sir.
Okay, and when can we expect these reports?
The comprehensive review, I put a 60-day tether on that. That's
60 days from today?
60 days. It should complete in mid-October, mid to late October.
Okay.
Secretary's strategic review will complete nominally 30 days after that. I do want to emphasize that's an aggressive timeline. I want to get these answers now, but I also want to get these answers right. And so we'll evaluate to make sure that we're doing a complete assessment and not just rushing to a partial assessment.
Okay, now you mentioned leadership, and particularly at the command level. Can you shed any more light on the two officers who were fired last week? The Navy mentioned a loss of confidence in their ability to command. Are you able to be more specific to the committee at this point about those two individuals?
Sir, if I could, I'd like to defer until the investigations are done, and then we can come forward with the full.
Okay, but well, can you say were those two individuals on board either of those ships?
The Commodore and the strike group commander were not on board the ships.
They were not aboard the ships?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, now, and certainly the chairman is correct, and witnesses are correct about sequestration, and my commendation to Senator Cotton for trying to solve this issue, and I want to be his teammate on that. It's way past time that we address this issue. We have a modernization issue, and we have the more immediate readiness issue. I think they're both tied together, and so let me ask you, just continue with you, Admiral Richardson. We have a requirement for 355 ships in our fleet today. Is that correct?
Sir, several studies, Navy studies, outside the Navy studies, have pointed to a fleet size at around 355, 360 ships.
And you support that, do you not, Secretary Spencer?
Yes, I do.
And then, Admiral, it's a fact that we're now asking 276 ships to answer the requirement that a minimum of 355 ships would take.
This is the math behind the fact that we can only source about 40% of the world demand right now.
And so, to the extent we're asking fewer ships to do a larger amount of work, and to the extent that we've reduced our fleet size by 20% since 9/11, it is a fact that the Navy is busier than ever, and that's got to affect readiness as well as the longer-term modernization issue. Is that not correct?
Sir, we are maintaining essentially the same level of forward presence with that 20% smaller fleet. That has resulted in some exceedingly long deployment lengths, as Chairman McCain pointed out. We've corrected that back down to about 7 months as a sustainable length. But our ships have been run hard. They are spending more time in maintenance, and that pressurizes the operational time. Having said that, again, I bring it back to the fundamental importance of command here, to monitor the readiness of your ships, your aircraft, your submarines, and to report when those...
Well, I appreciate your acknowledgement of that. Let's just talk a little about training, and let me toss out the idea of incorporating more virtual training, simulator-based training into the curriculum for deployed sailors. Are you considering incorporating more of this high-tech, high-fidelity and simulators into regular training as a way to address that issue?
Sir, we've been on that path for some time, and I'd love to take you around and show you some of the advanced simulators that we use both ashore and at sea to keep our skills.
So where we need to be on that?
Well, we can always do more, and we'll tell you that the technology is allowing us to get more and more realistic in the scenarios that we present to our sailors, and we're adopting that technology as fast as we can.
And finally, what about this issue of sleep deprivation? There have been some New York Times articles and other publications about pervasive sleep deprivation among sailors, particularly young surface warfare officers standing watch. Is that do you think that's likely to be one of the reasons that we eventually get down to on this issue?
Sir, we're investigating that specific claim very, very closely. Many parts of our Navy have already mandated a 24-hour circadian rhythm watch standing rotation, so to ensure that everybody gets sleep inside their natural circadian rhythm. Admiral Roden, from the Commander of Surface Forces, just recently issued, while it was recommended before, he now said it'll be mandatory, but we're diving into that deeply.
Well, we await your further information, and thank you for your leadership.
Admiral, is it true that some of our sailors are working 100-hour weeks?
Sir, I'll not deny that. The sailors are working very hard. We have been doing some work study, sort of workday type of studies. We've got some, particularly in the DDGs, the cruisers, the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, and we're starting to respond to that by supplementing the crews.
Okay, but I just point out, if we know that somebody's working a 100-hour work week, I'm not sure we need a study. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Richardson, you just said something really interesting just now, that it is the responsibility of the commander to monitor the readiness of their ships, to readiness to deploy. So are you saying that if a commander says that his or her ship is not ready, will that result in non-deployment of that ship?
If we're aware that a ship is not ready and certified to deploy, that ship should not deploy.
And you're going to take that commander's assessment of it. Is that how it works in the chain of command?
Well, there's also his immediate superior in command, and so there's several layers of people that are monitoring this. We don't put it all on the
Right.
commanding officer of the ship.
But I think is that what you meant when you said that you would have to also change the culture? Because already you're only able to meet 40% of the commander's requests. And so the culture is probably that everyone wants to meet the demands for deployment, and so the culture needs to be changed. That's safety first. Is that what you meant when you said culture?
I completely agree with you, ma'am. And we have a can-do culture, right? I mean, that's what we do. Nobody wants to raise their hand and say,
Yes.
I can't do the mission, but it's absolutely essential that when those are the facts, we enable that report.
So now you're going to institute a can-do with safety first culture.
Exactly.
The optimized fleet response plan, the new fleet deployment and maintenance model appears to be falling short. It leaves no margin for error and extended deployments. Maintenance backlogs and mistraining evolutions appear to have become the norm and commonplace. And while it is too early to identify the exact causes of the accidents, developing a more flexible and realistic plan should increase the ability to train and conduct maintenance and lead to fewer accidents. Admiral Richardson, is the Navy looking to update the plan, and how does the Navy intend to address this issue?
Ma'am, just to be very specific, the Optimized Fleet Response Plan, OFRP, is that plan by which we prepare, maintain, and prepare and certify for deployment those forces based here in the United States. And that is a flexible plan. There have been many times where I've had discussions with Admiral Davidson or Admiral Swift that we needed to accommodate a delay in maintenance, and so we extend the training period, and if necessary, we deploy late. You can only compress it so much.
Excuse me. So you're making a distinction that OFRP is for those ships that are on the mainland where the problem or many of the concerns arise with the forward deployed ships. So is there an OFRP plan that doesn't leave much room for exigencies?
This is the observation from Mr. Pendleton and the GAO that the way by which we generate and certify readiness in the forward deployed naval forces is a bit different. We expect them to maintain an overall higher level of readiness, and so they don't get as deep as maintenance out there. They get more continuous types of maintenance so that they can stay overall ready. But where we run into trouble is when the pyramid gets inverted. The first thing we should be doing is maintaining safe and effective certifications. Only with those done and the maintenance properly done can we expect to deploy effectively and execute the mission. What we're seeing is that particularly for the forward deployed force in Japan, that pyramid became inverted, mission became first at the expense of the...
So what are you planning to do to change that
This
situation?
is an absolute specific focus of the comprehensive review to dissect that and make adjustments.
You noted in your testimony, and this may be a question that you can only respond to for the record because I am running out of time. In your testimony, you said that the Navy is subjected to budget pressures to do more with less, operational pressures to put busy forces on station more quickly and more often, and schedule pressures to make adjustments to training and maintenance plans. And you also noted that none of these can excuse the commanders from doing what they're supposed to do. But of the three pressures that you identified in your testimony, which do you have the most control over? The budget pressure, operational pressure, schedule pressure. Which do you have the most control over?
I would say the two that we have greater control over are operational and schedule pressure.
So I would be interested to know what you're doing with your control in operational and schedule pressures to address these concerns that have been raised in this hearing.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony today. My deepest condolences go to the family members and the fellow sailors of the men and women who were killed on both the Fitzgerald and McCain. It's hard to imagine, no matter what your investigations ultimately prove, that at least some part of the fault will not lie with Congress and the steady erosion of budgetary support that we have provided for the United States Navy and the entire military. We've heard again this morning from both sides of our aisle complaints about the Budget Control Act of 2011 and specifically the automatic spending cuts known as sequestration. Well, we had a perfect chance to finally end those over the last week on the floor of the Senate. I offered an amendment, as Chairman McCain said, that would have eliminated those automatic spending cuts, not only on defense, but on domestic spending as well. It's no secret that I think many of those domestic programs could tighten their belt a little bit, but I knew that we needed a bipartisan solution. I think every member of this committee has called for that at one point or another to include every Democrat. But we didn't even have a vote on the amendment because Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, wanted more leverage in budget negotiations later this year. And the Democrats in his caucus went along with him. So their complaints about sequestration fall somewhat on deaf ears. Now, they will say that our amendment didn't also address the so-called mandatory sequester. But let me point out first that that doesn't affect a single dime of benefits to Social Security or Medicare or veterans benefits. And moreover, virtually every one of them has voted at least twice to extend the automatic sequester into the future when they did not seem that troubled by it. Politics prevailed here. Now, let me turn to the state of your sailors training. Admiral Richardson. In the GAO report, there are indications that in the forward deployed naval forces, you have sailors who have not achieved mission-critical certifications on things like seamanship, air warfare, ballistic missile defense, cryptography, electronic warfare, intelligence strike warfare, cruise missile tactical qualification, naval surface fire support, surface warfare, undersea warfare, and visual board search and seizure. Without trying to assess whether these failures or these lack of certifications were behind the incidents with the Fitzgerald and the McCain, I assume that's something that you seek to address rapidly?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
And to help the layman understand, these certifications would be akin in the Army or the Marine Corps to basic rifle qualifications, is that right?
Senator, some of them are. So there's sort of two tiers to those certifications that you just described, and depending upon which one you named, it would break out into some are just fundamental ship handling, navigation, safety, how to operate your ship safely at sea, the fundamentals, if you will. And then some of them are much more higher-end, sophisticated warfighting or requirements.
The Navy is obviously a forward-deployed force that is always operating, even if it's not in an active zone of conflict, whereas, say, the Marine Corps or the Army deploys to places like Iraq and Afghanistan and then trains at places like Camp Lejeune and Fort Campbell. Are these certifications things that can occur on board, or do they have to be off of a deployment cycle and occur back at their bases?
They can occur within that, particularly for the forward deployed naval forces. They can occur in the course of maintaining yourself operational. You just have to dedicate the time to do the training and get the team on board to do the certification.
Thank you. We've also spoken some about discipline and accountability for officers, to include some petty officers who were found at fault. What is the status, if any, of potential awards of medals for those sailors who saved the lives of their fellow sailors?
Sir, I'll have to get back to you on the specifics, but you're right. There was definitely heroic acts on both of those. I can get that back to you. It's certainly our intent to recognize heroism where it was seen.
I hope so. As you state in your written testimony, what the Navy does is inherently dangerous. I'd say that of all the armed forces, even when they're not in an active conflict in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and certainly great heroism was displayed. One final question I want to ask the Secretary and the Chief. In studying the causes of these incidents, what steps, if any, has the Navy and the intelligence community taken to rule out the possibility of a deliberate act of a hostile power?
Senator, it's all underway in the reports, what we call the ongoing reports, the technical reports that are going on right now. You heard the CNO speak earlier that Admiral Tai and her group in the 10th Fleet on the cyber side are doing their reviews there. Intelligence is also looking at it, so it is being discussed.
Thank you. Anything to add, Admiral Richardson?
No, sir, absolutely. No stone unturned. We're looking at everything.
Thank you.
On behalf of Chairman McCain, let me recognize Senator Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses. Before we begin on the topic, I want to just comment on Senator Cotton's discussion about his amendment. I supported the amendment and was looking forward to voting for it. Others in my caucus felt the same way. You have a reason to be concerned. The only thing I would add to your concern is there were a whole lot of amendments the Democrats wanted to offer, and they were all cut off too. So you didn't get a vote. You're not getting a vote was not because of people necessarily wanting to avoid the issue. It was wanting to have a robust amendment process. And if everybody else's amendments were going to get kicked out, sadly, yours did as well, and I regret that it was. Let me now focus on this topic. I want to acknowledge the sacrifice of the sailors who lost their lives in these instances. This is why we're here, and this is why we need answers, particularly those families from Virginia, Dakota Rigsby, Gary Ream, Timothy Eccles and Charles Finley, who were either from Virginia or had been stationed in Virginia. We need to acknowledge them. And Admiral Richardson, I talked to you yesterday about the seriousness of this investigation, the two investigations. I was governor of Virginia when there was a horrible, violent incident at Virginia Tech, and 32 people were killed by a deranged young guy who killed them. I went to Virginia Tech the day after the tragedy. I was told by the president of the university that they would impanel a panel to review what happened, and I said, no, you're not going to impanel a panel. I'm going to put together a panel. I'm going to make sure the panel has experts who have no connection with Virginia Tech and who have no connection with any of those who were injured or wounded, and I'm going to ask them to tell me everything that went wrong and everything we can do to fix it. I was advised by lawyers connected with the state, don't do that. It will give people a roadmap to bring a lawsuit. It will open up all kinds of pain for the state if you're candid and unsparing. And I said, I don't care about the lawsuit. People died, and the only thing that we can do, sadly, is try to learn everything we can from what caused them to die so that we can reduce the chance that it happens to anybody else. So we're going to get every answer, and we're going to be transparent and public about every answer, and then we're going to fix everything we can. And that's what we expect from the two investigations that are being done. They will be unsparing. They will get every answer. They will be transparent about every answer, and then we will work together with you to make sure we fix anything that needs to be done. You've been asked questions about training. I was on a radio program this morning, just coincidentally, in Hampton Roads, mentioned this hearing, and over the course of a 5-minute interview, the host said, I just got a text from a sailor saying that training on seamanship is lax. And by the end of the interview, he said, I've gotten 5 more texts basically saying similar things. I think this has been affected certainly by sequester and the reasons that we've discussed, but I want to ask about something else and ask whether this is going to be part of the scope of the investigation. My understanding was that in 2003, the Navy changed the Surface Warfare Officer Basic Training Course. It was a 6-month classroom instruction, and they changed it to a strictly computer-based syllabus. And then more recently, they returned to a class-based syllabus that was only a 9-week course. Is that correct?
Sir, that is correct. Back in 2003, we stood down the Surface Warfare Officer School at the division officer level, the beginning level, and we thought we could achieve the aim and train surface warfare officers, junior officers, with a computer-based approach combined with on-the-job training at sea. And we found that that was woefully inadequate, have reversed, come out of that. It was sort of a 2-step process to come out of it, but now our junior officers in the surface warfare pipeline do begin with a basic division officer course, which is 8 weeks long. It stresses fundamentals. It spends a tremendous amount of time on seamanship and navigation, lots of simulators, as Senator Wicker pointed out. And then about midway through their division officer tour, or between their 2 junior officer tours, there's an additional 8 weeks of more advanced training, still at the basic level, focused at the junior officer. But those have been put in place. The first one was put in place in 2012, second one in 2014.
I don't want to obviously predetermine what the results of the investigation will be, but I just want to make sure, is the scope of that initial training, 6 months to online to 8 or 9 or 12 weeks, is the scope of initial training going to be part of the investigation that's being done?
Specifically called out in the comprehensive review to look at individual training and professional development.
If I could, one last question. There is a blog forum that is used for discussion often by surface ship officers. It's called Commander Salamander, and there was a notable blog entry, a resignation letter, an anonymous resignation letter that just came to my attention late last night. It was published in November 2008, and here is a portion of the letter. The problem of checking the boxes, vice actually being a capable Navy, exists everywhere. Lessons learned and codifications of best practices have led the Navy to being a force focused on the checklist as the end state, vice actual capability. As one example, a float training group, ATG, does not care that a ship has a method to ensure safe navigation. I would like to provide that as an exhibit to my question, and again, just ask if early warnings like this will, in fact, be part of the scope of the investigation that is being conducted.
Senator, no stone unturned. We'll look at every indication we have and address that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kane. For the benefit of all that is here, we have a vote ongoing, and that is why my colleagues have left. They are going to vote, and they will return. Well, with that, let me seize the opportunity to begin a second round, which hopefully will have only one questioner. But Admiral Richardson, I know the Navy has put together the Optimized Fleet Response Plan, and that's the idealized way to schedule ships and to inform crews and to synchronized training, but when it impacts against the reality of delays in many different ways, it doesn't seem to work. Are you looking in this review at that optimized fleet response plan and how useful it is today, or how it might be altered or changed?
Sir, we are, but I would say that I think the optimized fleet response plan has been somehow misunderstood to be a rigid, unresponsive thing. It's actually very fluid, and it's just a process by which we generate, forces for deployment. And so, for instance, if a maintenance period, let's say for the carrier, goes long, the rest of the process will be adapted to accommodate that delay. If more training is required to get through the basic phase, we'll adjust. And so this is not a one size fits all. This is what we do and nothing else. It's actually a pretty fluid plan. It tries to get the maintenance done, get the manning on board early in the process, so those people that we train are actually the ones that we're going to deploy with. And then there's a sort of a crawl, walk, run approach to training, and all that is adaptive to the circumstances on the ground. And so I just wanted to try and make that impression that there is room for flexibility within the OFRP to accommodate for change.
Senator Reed, can I add something?
Ms. Pendle, yes, please, and I'll recognize Senator Ernst.
Yeah, so we looked at the optimized fleet response plan, and we looked at the Navy's plan for readiness rebuilding, and everything the Admiral said about it is true. There's really two things I'd want to leave with you. One, the Navy's plan for readiness recovery is predicated on the optimized fleet response plan, which is 4 words for schedule. That's because that's what it is. It's staying on time, that they're able to do that, and that's difficult when you have delays or whatever. The forward deployed naval forces in Japan, part of the reason we made the recommendation that we made is we didn't see a similar plan like that for those ships over there. There was not dedicated training time. There were not the things that we thought would be needed to create a sustainable situation.
Thank you.
Sir, if I could,
yes,
Mr.
sir.
Pendleton has it exactly right. And so if you look at the plan for forward deployed naval forces, there is a dedicated time. That's
right.
The plan. But the GAO rightfully looked at execution data, and it's hard to determine adherence to that plan because we just kind of prioritize getting out and executing the mission. The thing that would fall off is the dedicated training.
Thank you. Thank you both, gentlemen. Senator Ernst, please.
Thank you, Senator Reed. And gentlemen, thank you for being here today. And first, as well as a number of my colleagues has done, I want to express my sincerest condolences to the families of those that lost sailors in these very, very tragic incidents. And my thoughts and prayers will continue to be with you through this difficult time. And Secretary Spencer, Admiral Richardson, and Mr. Pendleton, thank you for being here today. These are difficult topics that we're discussing, and I hope that we're able to really shed some light on what's going on and truly do get to the bottom of this so it doesn't happen again. Mr. Pendleton, I want to follow up about the 100 hours per week, as Senator McCain had asked earlier. The GAO report found that sailors were working more than 100 hours per week, leaving them little time for rest. And I know we have that can-do attitude. Admiral, you stated that already. I know many, even of our operators in the Army, they want to fulfill a mission. They're not going to say no. But it's obvious that this is detrimental to our readiness. And can you talk about how that excessive workload has the ability to not only impact morale, recruitment, and retention, but also then the safety and well-being of the other sailors on those vessels?
I'll start, sir, ma'am, and let Mr. Pendleton pile on. There's no doubt that overworking a team, particularly over time, has an absolutely corrosive effect. We actually have a specialist in this area, Dr. Nita Shattuck at the Naval Postgraduate School, who has pointed out in very clear terms the need for getting sufficient sleep and getting rest in a 24-hour rhythm to get the most effectiveness out of that sleep. And so if we go beyond that, there are measurable degradations in your decision-making and in your performance. And so we need to make sure that we adjust back. The Surface Forces just recently mandated now that they do their at-sea rotations consistent with these rest principles. But to the GAO's point, we also need to make sure that our import workload is examined. As I said, we just did this for the destroyers and found that while there are no extra skills that are required, the capacity in port sometimes exceeds our at-sea manning models, and so we're making adjustments.
Thank you. Thank you, Admiral.
So everything the Admiral said, I think, is very honest and reflects the situation out there. One thing I would mention to the committee is that under the current criteria the Navy uses, that they expect the sailors to actually work 81 hours a week, 70 hours on duty, and then 11 hours for the other things. So it's a pretty grueling schedule programmed right in. I think what's happened is this has snuck up on them a little bit over time as it takes more work to keep the ship running. And so they end up with folks working over 15 hours a day on average. I don't have a lot of specific work. I'm citing a Navy study, but some of the folks sitting behind me and that work with me have done literally dozens of focus groups, and I don't think they didn't hear this in any single one. Everyone talked about the lack of sleep and the impact on them, and some of them said they wished for a 100-hour week. So I think it's pretty tough out there.
It is tough out there, and one thing I would emphasize, though, that is a commander's responsibility is to make sure that they are able to react when the time calls for it. As a lowly company commander running transportation operations, in combat operations, we're only required 4 hours of sleep for our soldiers that are driving trucks, and of course, every one of them would say, I can go 24 hours a day. But we know as commanders that you can't keep pushing our soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen to the limit and expect them to operate efficiently and safely.
If I may, Senator, I'd be remiss if I didn't jump in here and address an issue that when you hear about our studies, we're going to be coming back to you all to ask for some relief in certain areas. The Secretariat, my office, the CNO, and the Commandant of the Marine Corps are reviewing instructions to make sure that we are focused on readiness and lethality going forward. And those instructions that do not support readiness and lethality are going to be questioned and or asked to be reviewed by you all. It's what I call the rucksack issue. The best intentions of the world are handed down by folks to say, can you add this? Can you add this? Well, no one's taking anything out of the rucksack. And that's what we need to address right now, and that's what's going on.
Absolutely. As my adjutant general in Iowa always said, it's assume prudent risk. And that's what we want to enable our commanders to do, is assume that prudent risk. However, sometimes it's not prudent, and we should reject that. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
On behalf of Chairman McCain, Senator Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to say to all of our Navy families who have lost loved ones, thank you for being here today. We grieve with you, and we owe you an explanation of what happened, and I know our leadership feels the same way. Admiral Richardson, in the last year, the Navy has had 4 incidents involving the loss of life or injury, and 3 of the 4, the ships involved were home ported overseas, in fact, all in the same port in Japan. GAO found that the Navy counts ships home ported overseas as being in, quote, permanent deployment status, resulting in fewer training hours for sailors. And in fact, in 2015, GAO found there were no dedicated training periods at all for ships home ported in Japan. The Navy concurred with the GAO's recommendations and reported that it had developed revised operational schedules. But as recently as August, that's 2 years after the report, August of this year, Pacific Fleet officials told GAO that the revised schedules were, quote, still under review. Now, Admiral Richardson, 2 years is a long time. So what's the holdup here?
No, there's no excuse for that. We're investigating how that gap opened up. There's nothing defensible I can say for that.
Okay. I assume we're going to find a way to close this quickly now?
Absolutely.
So let me just keep asking, though, about where things have gone wrong. At the time of their respective incidents, did the crews of the Fitzgerald and the Antietam and the McCain have up-to-date warfare certifications?
Ma'am, many of them did not.
Of the 3, do you know how many had up-to-date certifications?
I can get you the exact number. There's a number of different certifications, and I'll provide that exact number for the record. But all three of them, because it was pervasive in the forward deployed naval forces.
Do you know offhand how many overseas home-ported fleet, what percentage of our overseas home-ported fleet currently has expired warfare certifications?
There are, just about every ship has some element of their certification expired. And that can be managed. If it's one thing, and an advanced warfare mission, for instance, you just don't assign them to that mission. Where it becomes troublesome is that if it becomes too many areas, and particularly in those areas that are directly related to safe and effective operation, the fundamentals.
Right.
And so that's when it becomes of a great concern.
So the GAO reported just last month that 37% of cruisers and destroyers home-ported in Japan had expired certifications in 2017. Does that sound about right to you?
I'll leave it to Mr. Pendleton to do the math, but that does sound about right.
Okay, so let me just ask Admiral Richardson, do you believe it's irresponsible to allow our sailors to deploy repeatedly on cruises without the training they need to ensure the safety of the ship and its crew?
Yeah, what had happened in those areas, ma'am, is that the team out there was conscious that these certifications were expiring. And it's a bit like your driver's license expiring. It may not necessarily mean that you don't know how to drive anymore. It's just, there's that expired. However, we do need to recognize that those certifications mean something.
Yes.
And you need to go back and recertify. And so what had happened instead is that they would do an evaluation just like I discussed and said, okay, well, the certification is expired. We're not going to get a time to get on board and do the certification for some time. And so we'll do a discussion or an administrative review to extend that. It was called a risk mitigation plan. That became pretty pervasive. And so it was this kind of boiling frog scenario that over time, over the last 2 years really, became acute. And so to answer your question, yes, no, is it irresponsible? Yes, it is irresponsible. But I just wanted to give you a sense for how that came about.
And I appreciate that. And what I'm hearing you say is that you're conducting a thorough review. This is not going to happen in the future.
We'll get this right.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me begin, as many of my colleagues have, in offering condolences to the family, friends of those who have lost their lives and those who have been injured. It's difficult to put ourselves into your shoes, and I just simply offer to you that while we can't take away the pain that you feel, we most certainly keep you and your loved ones in our thoughts and in our prayers. It also means that as this committee, we feel a real responsibility to try to share what happened, and not only that, but why. And I think both Senator Ernst and Senator Warren have hit on something here which is very important, which is we talk about the manpower and the number of hours that these soldiers have been serving and whether or not they've actually been able to do the training and so forth. Seems to be a consensus growing that we needed to have more resources available to do more training, to do the retraining, to allow these individuals to operate at as close to a peak efficiency as possible. That takes money and it takes resources. My question to begin with would be to Mr. Pendleton. Does the Navy have the ability to shift resources, if they were to be available, from programs involving modernization to readiness?
That would be tough. I mean, there's a lot of fungibility within the operations and maintenance accounts. That's not my specialty. There's limits on the modernization. I probably should get the Admiral or someone to comment on that. I mean,
that would be fine. Admiral Richardson, would you care to?
Senator, a programming shift of that type would probably require us to come back to Congress with an above-thresholding reprogramming request, and that would be adjudicated to make that happen. It's not easy.
The reason why I ask is that it seems to me that it's almost like squeezing a balloon in some cases, when we start talking about moving resources, even if we could move them, we're still talking about the limited resources brought about by sequestration and limited budgets that all of our armed forces are suffering with right now. If we take a look at the readiness side and the modernization side, we've got, just within the Navy itself, some of the best examples that we are going to continue to remind you of are 3 nuclear-powered submarines that are sitting at dock as opposed to being in depot, because we don't either have the depot space or the dollars in order to actually get them back up and operational. Billions of dollars in assets that are not at the ready, and in fact, they're not even dive certified. You've got over 60% of your FA-18s that need maintenance or that simply aren't operational at any given time. So this is a case of, even if we could move resources around, we have limited resources available throughout the different plans, not for upgrades, but just for maintaining the additional equipment, let alone coming back in and trying to find the additional manpower dollars so that we've got individuals who are on deployment that actually have the time to be trained as well in a perfect operating system. Just curious whether or not, and I know that the chairman has hit upon this, it is sequestration, which is causing a lot of this, but I'd like each of you to please respond, if we could, just how much of this problem that we've now seen is caused by a failure to properly fund the military in the first place with regards to not only modernization but readiness as well.
Senator, I'd like to dive in first here. I want to carry on your analogy. It's not a balloon, or if it's a balloon that is so pressurized, there's no movement. You squeeze it, it pops. That is the extent that I'd see it, coming at it from a business point of view. The funding balance to asset allocation here is way out of whack, and we have to get that back on track. There's other things we have to do, but if we're addressing the financial resource side right now, there has to be some adjustments because the balloon is at exploding pressure.
Admiral Richardson?
So I think the Secretary characterized that completely accurately. There's not a lot of room to maneuver. You're really robbing Peter to pay Paul, as you pointed out. And when I think of I think of the Navy, the nation needs, it's naval power, which is, yes, readiness, safety, effectiveness, first and foremost. It includes modernization, and it includes procurement to make sure that we stay relevant into the future.
You took my ending quote away, Admiral. That's exactly the way that I was seeing this. But let me end with this. To the families that are out there, I know that our focus right now is on the leadership within the Navy and the commanders in the Navy and what they want to do about it. This goes deeper than that. This is a case of where the United States Congress has to provide the adequate funding to take care of these young men and women who put themselves in harm's way every single day. And we will not forget that. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, sir.